Hey guys, in episode 2 of Used Motorcycle Rehab, we're going to swap out the horrific Clubman handlebars that came with our SV650 with a set of more sane Renthal dirt bike bars. Now, truth be told, these are actually meant for street use, but they're basically the same as what Renthal would sell you for use on a dirt bike. They make the seating position much more upright and they give you a lot more leverage on the handlebars, which is desirable for street use. One of my last bikes was a Kawasaki ZX6R, which came with race clip-ons, and these Clubman bars that the SV650 came with are even more aggressive than those. And they get uncomfortable for me after just a couple of minutes of riding. And I'm too old and fat for that nonsense, so I need bars on the bike that make it sane for a human to ride. You may remember that in episode 1 of Used Motorcycle Rehab, we repaired the clutch release mechanism and reinstalled all the controls in the handlebar in order to test it. The first step in episode 2, unfortunately, is to undo most of that and remove all of the controls from the handlebar so we can get it off the bike. This went pretty smoothly, and I was totally stoked to get rid of the horrific grips that the previous owner had put on it with those awful little metal rings. It went smoothly at least right up until I discovered that there wasn't enough slack in the throttle cables to disconnect them from the grip. I'm not sure exactly how the previous owner managed this, but somehow he used up all of the fine adjustment in the cables that are with the adjusters near the grip, and that meant that in order to get them off, I had to disconnect them from the carbs down onto the fuel tank. I had to lift the fuel tank and use the handy-dandy little prop rod to hold it up, remove the airbox, and disconnect one of the cables from the carbs in order to get enough slack in them to disconnect them from the throttle grip so I could get it off of the handlebar. Doing this gave me an excuse to use the handy-dandy prop rod that the bike came with, and frankly, this is an ingenious idea that I wish every motorcycle came with. I mentioned the ZX6R that I'd had previously, and man, I wish that bike had had something like this, where you could leave it attached and pivot the tank up to be able to work underneath it, but it didn't, and getting that off was a pain in the neck. These new bars are a beautiful aluminum part, which anybody who rides road bicycles will know is quite stiff. Transmits a lot of feel through them to your hands. It can be kind of a bummer on a road bicycle, but it's great on a motorcycle, which has so much more rubber between your hands and the road. As I started to reinstall the controls on the bars, I realized I had a problem, and that is that because these new handlebars position all of the controls a little higher up and farther back than the stock bars would have. Basically, the Renthal bar is wider and has more of a rake to it. The cables and the hoses for the brake master cylinder are not quite long enough to reach, at least with the stock bar risers. So I spent quite a bit of time fiddling around, as you can see here, trying to get everything positioned just right so that I could get all of the cables and hoses and the brake master cylinder and switches and stuff installed, so that when I would turn the bars, nothing would bind or be stretched and risk breaking the brake hose. That would be unfortunate. But no matter what I did, I couldn't get everything adjusted right so that it was both comfortable to use and so that everything wasn't stretched out when the bars were turned one way or another. Eventually I concluded that I couldn't just shout profanity at it until everything would line up correctly, and I decided to call it a night. Through the magic of Amazon Prime, I was able to get another set of bar risers within a day or two that made the bar position problem a little bit better, by lowering and moving the bars forward enough that got me enough slack to be able to get all the controls to reach. Anyway, these new risers got me enough slack that I was able to get all the controls to reach to where they need to go on the handlebars and get the controls reinstalled on the bars. It took quite a bit of messing around with still, and I'm not 100% satisfied with it. So at some point in the future, we may revisit the controls, and the solution for this is either go back to the stock bar or get longer throttle and brake hoses so that everything just reaches more easily. So we may revisit that in the future. But for now, everything's okay. The bars are positioned such that I can live with it, and all of the controls reach without straining. So we're good, and we can move on to reassembling everything else. I installed a set of my favorite grips, Progrip 717s, which frankly are priced so well and are so nice that I don't personally think there's any reason for other types to exist. That's just me, but these are my favorite, and I feel strongly about that. I also installed a set of mirrors using the mounting bosses available on the clutch perch and the brake master cylinder, which is like where the stock mirrors go, basically. The bike came with this horrible bar end mirror installed on it when it came to me, and I can sort of see why people like those, but at least for me, my arm would be in the way when trying to look at it, so it was useless. And while these stock mirrors, or stock-like mirrors anyway, your elbows get in the way and you kind of end up doing this motion to be able to see in them, I find that to be a much less intrusive thing than trying to like move your arms so you can see the bar end mirror. So I went with these. And also, I personally think that these make the bike look a lot nicer than the bar end mirror does. Whereas these, they look classy. You know, if you asked a kid to draw a picture of a motorcycle, chances are if you included mirrors, this is what they would look like. So I'm happy with these, even though by no means are they perfect. So yeah, I spent a little bit of time trying to get them adjusted right, but it was nighttime and I couldn't take the bike for a ride to try them out, which was sort of useless, and I got them adjusted wrong and had to redo it later, but I spent time adjusting them. Anyway, with the new bars, grips, and mirrors installed, I had the most egregious of the comfort issues dealt with. The bike is now reasonably pleasant to sit on, and I can now move on to fixing some of the other issues that are merely annoying or something that I should fix but are not critical. So stuff like the bent radiator, the fact that there aren't any turn signals or license plate lights, stuff like that. So I hope you'll stay tuned. We'll get to those soon enough, and I will see you in the next one.